Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings upon each and every one of our brothers and sisters, wherever you are joining in for this wonderful and exciting program that we have today for us in honor of June 19th or Juneteenth. It's a holiday to commemorate the emancipation of the enslaved Africans that were here in America. It's a historically an important and significant moment in our history in America. And as Muslims, we have an obligation to also reflect about its history and its importance to our community and our Muslim community, and why we have to have this discussion. And we are honored today to have an esteemed lineup of speakers with us. Inshallah ta'ala, joining me is Brother Mustafa White, our HHRD board member. With us is also our dear and esteemed Imam Siraj, Wahhaj from Masjid al-Taqwa, the Imam in New York. And our esteemed other guest is Brother Javaid Siddiqi, who is the CEO of Helping Hand. So I would like to welcome them to this wonderful discussion, and this program, inshallah ta'ala, will be a benefit to all of us. So in that, we're going to have a quick, introduction by them, and kind of they're going to reflect on the importance and significance of this day for us as Muslims and as a community. So first and foremost, our esteemed brother Mustafa White, inshallah ta'ala, with his introduction, inshallah.
I'm happy to be invited to help bring some light into this particular situation by the grace of Allah. The importance of Juneteenth goes back a long way, and it differs from one group of African Americans to the next. Like I grew up in Louisiana. People wouldn't dare celebrate Juneteenth in Louisiana back in the 50s. So we never did that. And then I moved north to right outside of Philadelphia. Then those are the times you start hearing about Juneteenth and things of that nature. I think it's relevant for us to start to look at why we should honor this day and how we can benefit by moving forward based on the information that we can understand that our ancestors brought to us, and where it takes us in the future. Especially as a Muslim community, we need to know these kinds of things, because these are the people on the ground, the people in the streets, those who will be willing to look at Islam and say that they understood it based on it being part of the liberation theology of the groups that were enslaved in this country. So I think it's very important, and I'm glad to be a part of this project.
Jazakallah khair, mashallah. We're very happy to have you here and to learn and benefit from your experience and knowledge, inshallah. Our esteemed Brother Javaid Siddiqi, inshallah, your opening statement.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakumullah khair for the kind invitation. And I think this opportunity for us as citizens of this country, as Muslims in America, and an opportunity to reflect on an event that has really marks a very, very important turning point in the history of the citizens of this country and this nation. So gathering, when the idea was brought up, we really felt it was a turning point, which we must emphasize. We must, as Muslims, and there's a huge migrant community who have really arrived in America later on, and who may not understand the significance and the importance of this day and this time in the history of this nation. So we felt that it's very important to understand it from a Muslim perspective as well, to understand it as a citizen of this country, because it really defines who we are. It really sets the values and the principles on which we operate. Inshallah, later on when I speak about this topic, I also want to bring up the principled and focused perspective of our religion. And we'll talk more about it, inshallah, in detail. But there are multiple angles that we need to really look at this. And it's important, once we understand it, that we stand up to ensure that this type of behavior, this type of attitude in society, this whole notion of racism really does not exist. And it can we do something to eliminate this? what can we do and how can we work together to really bring this down. So that's really the perspective. And I think on this platform, it's very important for us to understand even the international perspective. And inshallah, I'll talk about it in the detailed discussion. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Our esteemed Imam Siraj, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Sheikh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم. Like Sheikh Javaid, my position is very similar. I want to quote one of the companions, Muawiyah. He said, "La hakima illa dhul tajibah." There's no real wisdom without experience. So what I like to do today is give some perspective as a Muslim. This whole idea of Juneteenth and this day that's being celebrated, and what's the role of the Muslims? What are we supposed to do? And I want us to be crystal clear about our involvement, our necessary involvement, and I want to give it from an Islamic perspective, similar to Sheikh Javaid. Inshallah.
No, really, Jazakallah khair. And I know that all of you have amazing perspectives. So, inshallah, with that, we have done the introduction and the opening statements. Now, inshallah, our first discussion will be led by Brother Javaid Siddiqi, our CEO, inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to talk about our moral responsibility to racism and what are we doing as an organization, inshallah ta'ala. With that, I welcome him to the stage and platform, inshallah ta'ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Brothers and sisters, I really welcome everyone today to this conversation. I think a very important conversation that we're having. I want to even step back and this whole issue of racism and this whole issue of looking at looking at the underlying problem that we are facing. This issue of racism really goes, and I'm kind of really stepping back from the specific issue of Juneteenth, because I truly believe our scholars and our brothers, Imam Siraj and Brother Mustafa, will inshallah be able to give a very beautiful perspective and a historical perspective on that. But I want to step back and take you to this issue and the origins of this issue from a moral perspective. This problem of racism, brothers and sisters, started before the creation of man. Seriously. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam for the first time, I'm sure we all know the story. And he basically says, "Ana khayrun minh, khalaqtani min narin wa khalaqtahu min teen." I'm better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. That has been the eternal, the very first sin that was committed, the sin of racism. And as a result of this entire history of mankind and what has happened since then, I also want to briefly bring about the perspective that as an international NGO, as a humanitarian organization, what we see around us, and many times people may not understand what we may be talking about. Brothers and sisters, we work over more than 50 countries around the world. We deal with famine, we deal with refugees, we deal with poverty and hunger and suffering. And we see it every single day. We see the impacts, and I want to just qualify this, and so listen to this very carefully. We see the impact of racism every single day. Why do I say that? When it comes to refugees, when it comes to hunger, when it comes to poverty, what is at play here? One group of people feels that they are superior to the other group, and as a result, they drive them out of their homes, they drive them out of the resources that this second group, this deprived group has actually access to, or should have access to. When we talk about the distribution of wealth in society, and you say, well, there is the haves and the have-nots, what is at play? It is racism at play. That you felt that there's one group of people who are less deserving, and therefore they can be driven out of their homes, they can be made to, disproportionately be sent to prison, be sent on the streets, made refugees, treated differently. This treatment of human beings and a race of people or an entire group of nation made not human, because this is the effort of shaitan, that he first creates this perception that this group of people is less human. They are not deserving of the same rights that the second group or this elite group has. This is primarily at play. The disasters that we see, the famine that we see, the refugee crisis we see around the world, and we see it firsthand, brothers and sisters. We see the impact, it has an impact on women and children and innocent people, elders and old and young, every one of them. So we want to bring that perspective, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the role of a man? What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when created man, he endowed him, he gave him these rights. These are God-given rights of equality. They have the right to live as human beings. They have the right to food. They have the right to a shelter. They have all these different rights, which another man, just because they felt they have more rights, somehow they're better human beings, somehow, and they're subjugating the rest of the masses. And as a result of that, creating all these problems that we see. And this is what I think we want to, as a humanitarian organization, we want to bring that perspective in front of people. Don't let this evil take hold in society. When such an evil takes hold in society, at the end of the day, what happens? People suffer. People suffer. And we've seen this suffering throughout history of mankind. We see it unfold every single day around the world, everywhere we work, in the Rohingya camps, in Syrian camps, in Kashmir. What makes one group of people subjugate another group of people? Because they think they are superior. So this problem is just not limited to our nation, and I think this is the issue that we are seeing here. People are, alhamdulillah, waking up to this reality, and they're saying enough is enough. And in that context, obviously, this time, and I do want to just bring about just a few things. As Muslims, we need to understand the principle. Brothers and sisters, we don't want to do this just because it's, politically correct. Just because everyone is doing it. Just because we have this uprising going on and we want to be part of it. No. And I would really say that very, very firmly. No. We do it because it's the right thing to do, because Allah, because God, because our Creator has ordained us. Kunu qawwamina bil qist. This justice is a direct order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If somebody ever asked you, what is Islam? What a Muslim should be? And Islam is nothing but justice. Justice. Islam, no one in Islam believes that another person should be made a Muslim. No. As a Muslim, it's my responsibility to ensure that justice is served for everyone around me. If somebody wants to become a Muslim, if somebody wants to become whatever religion they follow, it's their choice. That is a choice that's given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. And He's going to be accountable to that. But as Muslims, we must ensure that the distribution of wealth, the distribution of justice, the distribution of resources, the distribution and people's ability to live on equal footings is maintained in any society. That's what's at play. This Juneteenth event really presents really a time in history, and obviously, inshallah, our esteemed guests will talk about that in more detail. But we as Muslims, we from the humanitarian perspective, must really bring this other perspective, and this is where I really want to focus my attention. Brothers and sisters, we must not let any such injustice continue in any society, in our society, for the betterment of our future generations. Because this evil of racism that started by the devil on day one before the creation of man is the root of all evils in ways. You can really call it the root of all evils. That's what creates all these wars, all these atrocities, all these injustices, because that's what continues and continues and continues. And we see the manifestation of that even in our country. The African American community, what they're facing right now, in terms of police brutality, in terms of all the injustices, is nothing but a manifestation of this racism, which we understand that very well. And we as Muslims, number one, must understand the principle of what this is. Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi. The Prophet ﷺ said, if somebody would see from among you an injustice being done, he must change it. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. If he can't do that, he at least needs to speak up about it. وَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And if he cannot even do that, then he must really think, at least in his heart, think that it's really wrong. This is the principle that we are coming from. The famous sermon of Prophet ﷺ, which is referred to 1500 years ago. The Prophet ﷺ was the first one who has put an end to this kind of racism by making his very famous sermon in which he said that there's no priority, there's no preference of an Arab over a non-Arab or a black over a white. This is why we are focused on the principle. We are doing this, we are supporting this, we are in solidarity with our African American brothers and sisters because of this principle. That's number one. That must always come first. We're doing this because it's the order of Allah. We're not doing this because it's politically correct. Number one. The second thing, this is the time, brothers and sisters, the Muslim community and all of us together must stand in solidarity and build the coalition, build the collaboration, and build the support structures with our African American Muslim community and the community at large. This is the time to build that coalition. This is the time. Hilf al-Fudul, a very famous instance of the life of Prophet ﷺ, where people from all walks of life came together for the right thing to do. And the Prophet ﷺ even later on said in his life that even if after Islam, if one of these covenants of Jahiliyyah, one of these covenants of ignorance days were to be presented, I will still stand up for it. That says something. And we must develop and build those coalitions and partnerships. And finally, and I'll say this, inshallah, before concluding. Brothers and sisters, we must ensure that sustainability on this issue is there. At the end of the day, events happen, and events have been happening for the past so many hundreds of years. And even though the past 50, 70 years, we see different events happening, people uprisings start, but eventually they die down. This is an opportunity for us, brothers and sisters, to create the programs, the sustainability goals for us to how can we ensure at a policy level, at a government level, at the polling booth, at the election of the city councils, at the election at the local level. What are some of these policies that we're going to put together, that we're going to work together, supported financially, supported with our intellectuals, with our education? What is our plan for sustainability? That's what I think I'm going to ask our community and our leadership to really work on. So these three things are really need to be kept in mind. the principle, the partnerships, and the sustainability. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be that beacon of light that would help really put an end to this evil in society. Put an end to this injustice that is going to affect not only us, but our children and our future generations. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to really help us to be the ones who would really do something positive and do something practical at the end of the day, inshallah. I hope and pray that you find this webinar, inshallah, informational. I hope and pray that you'll be part of this change. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Javaid, for that very beautiful, talk and discussion. And obviously, we are still going to learn ourselves a lot from our esteemed guests on this subject. But really, Jazakallah khair, and we really appreciate your words and reflections. With that, inshallah ta'ala, I would like to bring our esteemed second speaker, Brother Mustafa White, who is a known figure in the Islamic community and really has been a forefront of a lot of issues in our community. And he's going to speak about a topic that a lot of Muslim immigrants or children who are born here, but their parents are immigrants and who don't understand the legacy and the value and the contribution of the Black and African American communities and what they have done for the Muslims in America. With that, inshallah, I welcome our esteemed and honorable Brother Mustafa White to, inshallah, educate us and to give us some perspective on this, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam too. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Very happy to have you here with us.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, thank you, Helping Hand, for giving me this opportunity to share some information historically about Islam in America. So I decided to do it from the perspective of organized Islamic effort, even though there were many individuals who were also involved. I'm just trying to give it a bigger picture as I go through this. And I wanted to start from the perspective of Juneteenth, which Imam Siraj will talk about after me, but about a generation or two right after Juneteenth, and about 50 years after Juneteenth, the first organized effort Islamically came through a man by the name of Timothy Drew Ali. Now, I'm not discussing the orthodoxy or to critique his theology, but in 1913, he started a movement called the Moorish Science Temple of America on the streets of Detroit, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and other southern cities. And my point here is to try and connect the dots from Juneteenth as to when Islam finally hit the streets, whether it was orthodoxy or not. Drew Ali was born in 1886. Which was only about 20 years after Juneteenth. And he started his movement in 1913 in those cities. The part that you should know about his movement is that it was all based on the injustice of racism, as some of the things Brother Javaid Siddiqi mentioned. This racism and seeking justice in America was part of his connection to what he put forth to as Islam during his day and in his time. And that's the important thing to think about here. Liberation theology was very important. He chose Islam as his vehicle to do that, and he made his message based on that. And many of those Moorish science folks exist today in some of those cities that I mentioned. The next group I wanted to talk about as an organized effort was established by Fard Muhammad, and he was born in 1877. Again, very close, 20, 30 years from Juneteenth time, I believe it was. He established a nation of Islam that we're somewhat familiar with, or all familiar with. And after he passed on, he passed the movement on to Elijah Muhammad, And the movement started out in 1930, again in cities like Detroit, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, other East Coast and Midwest cities. Again, the liberation theology was in response to the injustice of racism and seeking justice in America. They have a long legacy in this country. They still exist. And I know many people who came through that movement, including our esteemed speaker, Imam Siraj Wahhaj. So I'm trying to paint a picture. I'm trying to put the dots together here as we go forward in terms of historical perspective on Islam in an organized effort in this country. I also wanted to bring up the Qadiani group, the Ahmadiyya group. Ahmed Ghulam, who was born in 1835 in India, he sent Mufti Muhammad Siddiqi to the United States in 1920 to start his Qadiani group here. Many of the converts, many of the people who accepted Islam under Mufti Muhammad Siddiqi were African American. The significance here is that many of them were musicians and they carried the message of Islam, and a number of people came through that organization and became Muslims prominent today that started the various groups that they exist in. So what we have here are these three groups, regardless of their theology, who considered themselves Muslims, who called themselves their religion Islam. The connection was the theology or the liberation theology that Islam gave to them, seeking justice from the injustices of racism. This is important to understand because Islam was on the scene. It's known in these cities that I mentioned, specifically Northeast, Northwest, and some southern cities. The liberation theology was there. People were searching for a mechanism by which they can find justice from the scourge and the legacy of slavery going forth in this country. Now, all of these three groups were contemporaries of each other. There was some conflict, but that's not the scope of this talk. The idea is to get you to see that Islam was on the scene amongst African Americans early on in the 1920s, in the 1930s, and the 1940s. They may not have had all the knowledge, they may not have the correct theology, but they called themselves Muslims and they were attaching themselves to Islam. And those groups are still here today. I know many converts who have come through all of those groups to Orthodox Islam, including, as I said, Imam Siraj, including my wife and others. Imam Zaid Shakir started there. It's very important to know that these groups exist and they still exist, and they're coming to Islam daily. So it's very important. I want to fast forward here and switch over to what you might consider Orthodox Islam and where that comes in. Well, I'm going to use an important figure by the name of Sati Majid, Sheikh Sati Majid, born 1883 in Sudan. And he came to the United States in 1904 and started his work in Detroit and in New York City and in Buffalo. And he established the Islamic Benevolent Society in Detroit. He established the Muslim Welfare Society in New York. He also made contact with the Moorish Science Temple, the Nation of Islam, and I believe the Qadianis. It was not a pretty picture, but they were aware of each other, especially in Chicago and Detroit. Sheikh Sati Majid, as I said, represented the orthodoxy of Sunni Islam as he came and he began to spread his dawah in those cities that I mentioned: New York, Buffalo, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Midwest, those places like that. He made contact with all the Muslims in those cities, trying to bring attention to the plight of the African American and the need for the African American Muslims to get together with those from the Muslim world. One of the things that he was doing while he in this process, he started the, as I said, the Muslim Welfare Society in New York. And later on, he started the Islamic mission in New York, or he started it with someone by the name of Dawood Faisal. And Dawood Faisal was born in 1891. Dawood Faisal started the masjid there in State Street, New York, in Brooklyn. And the reason I come to this point is because those modern day movements that I was a part of, and Imam Khalid Griggs and other brothers that I knew, those founders of those movements used to converge at State Street Masjid, where Sheikh Faisal and others like that from the early groups would congregate and develop and start their work in the dawah for Islam in this country. It was during the 1960s and the 1970s. The Imams from the Dar al-Islam movement came out of State Street Masjid and established the Dar al-Islam movement in the early 60s during the Civil Rights Movement. At the same time, the founder of the Islamic Party also frequented State Street Masjid, founded the Islamic Party in 1972 in Washington, D.C. The purpose of these groups were to make Islam a household word in America. It was the first or second or third generation that came along up from slavery in the modern period, the 60s and the 70s. Those folks who had joined these movements were looking for the same thing that the earlier prototype groups were looking for: justice for the African American people and liberation theology without being connected to the religion of the slave master, actually. And I was part of that as I accepted Islam in 1971. During that period, I would travel to New York, I would travel to New Jersey, I've been in Cleveland, I've been in Chicago, and got to see and got to know those earlier groups of Muslims who didn't have much knowledge. But what they had was a passion for the liberation from this injustices in the country that they lived in. And that's what they were looking for. It reminds me of a lady that I met after I accepted Islam. Her name was Amina, and she was from Pittsburgh. I was about 22 years old, and she was 73. And she had been Muslim most of her life in Pittsburgh. So I used to talk to her, and I said, Amina, tell me about Islam in Pittsburgh. She said, we had the Quran, we knew how to pray, and Islam was it for us. I met Ibrahim Dean, 1972, 1973 from Pittsburgh again. He was reciting Quran. He had been in Pittsburgh a long time. Again, it's Islam as liberation theology, seeking a way out of the injustices of the society that we lived in. El-Zadeen Village in New Jersey was established by Professor El-Zadeen, who was also a contemporary of Imam Sati Majid. And they set up a place over there trying to establish Islamic groups, societies. It was out on a farm that they had. I visited in Jersey City, Din Alahi, an African-American group dedicated to the teaching of Arabic and Islamic studies in the 40s and 50s up till now. I'm not sure whether they still exist. In Jersey City, I visited Beirut Quraysh by Imam Dawood and Sheikh Ibrahim in the 60s. And they had a large business operation and masjid there, trying to establish again the situation by which African Americans could find themselves, finding a way for themselves out of this injustice, and again, the liberation theology. This is the history in a nutshell of those organized groups. And I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, MIB, Mosque of the Islamic Brotherhood, by Imam Ahmed Tawfiq in Harlem. And Imam Tawfiq was a student of Malcolm X, and he was part of that group. And he established this Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood in Harlem, and still there today under the imamship of Imam Talib. So I want to paint a picture that Islam has been around amongst the African Americans, and we know famous African Americans, Malcolm X, we know Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we know Muhammad Ali, we know others who have come through. And by the grace of Allah, there's still that that core, that stream that we're looking for is that liberation theology and seeking justice from a society that has been so extremely unjust to us since the time of our freedom back to Juneteenth and beyond. So what is the message for our immigrant brothers and sisters who are here, who may not know about the history of Islam in this country? Take some of these names that I've mentioned. There's lots of information about them. The history goes back and it's rich. I just gave the information on the organized efforts. There are lots of individuals that I'd heard about in the past who were Muslims for one way or the other, who were African Americans, who were trying to bring this deen, this religion, to the African American people, mostly Northwest, Midwest, and East Coast. However, there are a number of individuals, there are a number of books, there are a number of things that you should know. Our immigrant brothers and sisters should know that because of the struggle of African Americans, and the legislation in the mid-60s, that legislation allowed them to come in to this country and develop communities, so forth and so on. But perhaps what was missing was the connection for my brothers and sisters coming in from the Muslim country, that there needed to be more of a link between us and them. So I visited West Africa recently, and I visited Turkey a couple of years ago. And what I found was, going to those countries, I felt like if I was living in either place and I got there, I would have to find out how I can connect with those who are doing the work of Islam and find out what I could do to help them, what I could do to understand their culture, what I could do to understand the language, what I could do to understand the history, and how I could help going forward in developing the cause of Islam. This didn't happen, I believe, when our brothers and sisters came, not to a greater extent. Looking back and having these discussions with brothers who've been around for the last 50 years, we know that this thing actually didn't take place, and it should have, and it's caused kind of a disconnect. However, this pandemic has given us a reason to reflect and think about what it is, what the defects are in our relationships amongst the immigrant groups and the African American groups. We have to go back and reconnect. We have to go back and understand each other. And our immigrant brothers need to go back and do a historical check, a language check, a cultural check, and making sure that we understand each other going forward. This talk that I give about the history of Muslims and in the US, usually it takes about 3 hours. When I started this about 6 years ago. And then I cut it down to 1 hour and 45 minutes when I used to go around the country and give this lecture. Now I'm giving it in about 20 minutes by the grace of Allah. But the point of the matter is, we need to know one another better as we go forward. This pandemic has exposed some of our weaknesses. What we need to do is look at those weaknesses, analyze what we need to do to go forward as a united Muslim community, and understanding each other's role as we go forward. I think this will be key, and I think this is what our brothers and sisters from the Muslim world needs to know. However, the generation that came after them, their kids, we might be on point. They know a lot more than their parents. They speak the language, they know the culture. So by the grace of Allah, as we go forward, as we understand what we can do to help each other and put everything on the table that needs to be there and develop and strategize and move forward, I think that will help the cause of Islam tremendously and develop those kinds of things, programs and things that we need to push this entire process forward by the grace of Allah. I just want to just share those few things, and hopefully that I've given some perspective from the 1913 up till actually to the mid 80s by the grace of Allah.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair, Brother Mustafa White, for this. Again, I know that it was very brief and it doesn't do justice to the beautiful history and legacy that our African American brothers and sisters have laid for us, that we are reaping those benefits as even as myself as an African immigrant, or other immigrants that have come to this country are benefiting from through the civil rights movement. And obviously, these efforts are what changed the course of America. And Alhamdulillah, there's a lot that needs to be done. And I think this is where we're going to be having that discussion very soon about. I want to bring in our esteemed Sheikh Imam Siraj Wahhaj to kind of talk about why, what is this emancipation that happened, on June 19th, and why is it significant to remember it? What does it mean to be freed at that time? And the historical perspective, and really, educate us from your experience and your thoughts on what is going on in America today. And then inshallah we'll have a group discussion with both of our speakers after Imam Siraj speaks, inshallah ta'ala.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to first thank Brother Mustafa and Javaid for their really wonderful presentations, and I'm going to actually build on them. And I want to begin my talk with a supplication that the Prophet made, peace and blessing be upon him, because it's critical. It's critical in my presentation. I'm probably going to do a little bit more than you think that I'm going to do. Allahumma inni a'udhu min ilmin la yanfa'u. Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from knowledge that doesn't benefit. I am a researcher. I love to research. I'm always on current events. I read 3, 4, 5 newspapers, find out what's going on. And current events will tell you what's going on, but history will explain how it got that way. Before I talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, I'm of the opinion that oftentimes when people know better, they do better. Some people, I don't care how much knowledge you have, they won't do the right thing. And that's why Sir Isaac Newton said that I can calculate the movement of the stars, but not of the madness of man. There's some crazy people. And I'm telling you right now, even though we have the good feeling of the people protesting, black people, white people, yellow people, brown people, people all over the world that are protesting, but I'm telling you, usually after that, you have the backlash. Because those people that are entrenched in this racism, really white nationalism, white supremacy, they're going to go hard. So what are we going to do? What is our role? What is the Muslims' role in this June 10th, 10th? What are we doing? The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said that there was a prophet that was beaten by his people so much that his face began to bleed, and he wiped the blood from his face and said, Allahumma ikfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people, for they do not know. I'm telling you, most people, maybe even a lot of African Americans, have no idea to the extent that black people have been damaged by this racism. Let me give you one idea about my research. I started to study this country, my country, the life expectancy compared to other countries. So life expectancy in America, the average age, life expectancy is 78.6 years. So the average person in America lives to be 78.6 years. But that's very misleading. So that would be like 45th in the world. United States is 45th. But that's misleading. If you take an African American man, his life expectancy isn't 78.6 years. His life expectancy is 71.5 years. If they were taken as a nation, they would be 111th, not 45. How did it get there? This country of ours, it's not a Muslim country. There's some things about it that are very, very good, and there's some things about it that's not so good. Martin Luther King Jr. said, every one of you are either a hammer or an anvil. That means either you will shape the society or be shaped by the society. Everyone is either a hammer or an anvil. And you have to ask yourself the question, which one will you be? 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, 157 years ago. Abraham Lincoln signed that document that freed Black people from slavery. But there is, in the state of Texas, slaves, 250,000 slaves, didn't hear about it until 2.5 years later. And that was on June 19th, today, 1865. So many Black people, not all of them by no stretch of the imagination, took that day as a holiday. Americans take July 4th as a holiday, the day of freedom. America, freedom from the British Empire. How bad is it? You know, I like sports. I grew up playing basketball, football, baseball. And one day, last year, I was turning the channel, and there was a baseball game, the New York Mets, and I forget the team that they were playing. And I looked, and I saw something strange and something weird. Every play on the New York Mets had the same number. You see, in all sports, not only do they have the name of the person on the uniform, but on the back they have the number. And everyone on the team, each team have a different number to identify them, like LeBron James, number 23, in honor of Michael Jordan, who wore the number 23. Kobe Bryant, 24, so forth and so on. So I looked and saw that all the Mets had the same number, and then the other team, all of them had the same number. So what is this? The number 42. They all wore the number 42. Why? Because for the first time in Major Baseball, the number 42 was retired so that nobody can ever wear the number 42 except April 15th. On April 15th, every player on every team wore the same number, 42. Why? Because in 1947, April 15th, the first African American was allowed to play Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson. So in honor of him. So what I'm saying, the first thing I'm saying, someone asked the question, what will be the future of America? That's a big question. The answer is, what do you want it to be? And what are you willing to do to make it like that? Allah said in Quran, you shall have nothing except for what you strive for. What do you want America to be? What is it right now? What's going on now? Brothers and sisters, I'm telling you what's going on now is no short, is divine. From the pandemic, COVID-19, all of that, the timing is right. Let me tell you what happened as Allah would have it. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, Antum shuhada Allah fil ard. Now I'm saying to you, Abdirahman, you're going to have to stop me because I got a lot of stuff to say. So feel free, when you're ready, say, Imam, I'm sorry, We got to stop you. But I'm letting you know right now, I'm going to keep on going until you stop me. What, what's going on in America? The Prophet said, Antum shuhada Allah fil ard. You are Allah's witnesses on earth. I want you to go back, not a couple of weeks ago, with the murder of George Floyd. No. I want you to go back to March 7th, 1965. March 7th, 1965. A Sunday. 600 black people were planning to march from Selma, Alabama to the headquarters of the state capital to Montgomery, 54 miles. And when they went to have a peaceful protest, the police, white police, beat them with billy cubs and dogs and hoes, and some of the demonstrators were killed. But what they didn't know, that there were some cameras rolling, and what they did was caught on national TV. That day is called Bloody Sunday. And what were they marching for? Black people who were freed. Not only the Declaration of Independence, not only the Constitution of the United States of America, not only the Bill of Rights, but they were the Emancipation Proclamation. And all they wanted to do was vote. You know, black people could have voted, yeah, but they were suppressed in their voting. You know, black people had to take a test. It's called literacy test. Can you put Sheikh Javaid on right now? Can you put him next to me? I'm going to ask him a question. Sheikh Javaid, can you hear me? Sheikh Javaid, can you hear me?
I think he dropped off. Sorry, Sheikh.
Okay, I'm gonna then Abdirahman, I'll do it with you. I'm gonna give you some money right now.
Okay, all right.
Really, I'm gonna give you $1,000 right now, and if you can answer this question, and you get the $1,000 from Sheikh Mustafa.
Wow.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
All right, go ahead.
I'm gonna ask you one of the questions that black people were asked when they went to vote. See, white people, all they had to do was vote, but black people had to answer some questions. And I'm going to ask you one of the questions. If you get it right, I'll give you $1,000. Are you ready? Question number one: how many bubbles in a bar of soap?
How many bubbles in a what?
A bar of soap.
I don't know.
Of course you don't. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
You'll never answer the question. The point was they're trying to stop the black people from voting. Actually, another question, actually easy one. You should be able to do this. And this is a real question that appeared in 1965. The question is, we want you to recite the Constitution of the United States of America by heart. Go ahead.
No one would.
Okay, of course. Okay, you can put it back on me now.
Okay. But it's
Okay. So the point I'm saying is that the whole world watched that. And so 2 days later, the 9th of March, there were not 600 demonstrators. There were 2,500 demonstrators headed by Martin Luther King Jr. And that day is called Turnaround Tuesday because they were given an injunction by the judge not to be able to march. So it wasn't until March 25th on a Sunday that they had gotten the approval to march, to demonstrate, to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery. And it wasn't 600 black people. It wasn't 2,500 people. It was over 25,000 people that marched there. What did they get for it? August of that year, President Johnson signed into the law Voting Rights Act of 1965. So you see what happened? You know what the difference was? It was captured. It was captured. The people saw it. And when George Floyd was brutally murdered, people saw it. There's an Islamic principle there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls the angels and He asks them, whenever Allah asks a question, He doesn't ask the question because He don't know the answer. He asks the question to teach. He said, what are my servants saying? The angels say, they're glorifying you. Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. Allah asks them the question, how ra'uni? Do they see me? يقولون لا رأوك يا رب. No, they don't see you. Allah said, كيف لو رأوني? What if they saw me? Oh, Allah, if they saw you, they'll be stronger in their worship of you. They'll say more takbir, more alhamdulillah. Allah asked them the question, what are they asking for? They're asking for Jannah. He said, do they see the Jannah? No, they don't see it. What if they saw Jannah? They would be more earnest. What am I saying? Seeing is believing. Brothers and sisters, this is a very, very important moment in our history. The question is, what are we going to do as Muslims? And I think I want to, some of you may be concerned as Muslims, Imam, you know, what should we do? How should we do it? Should we protest? Recently, I was with, about a week ago, Ibrahim Rasool, the former South African ambassador to the United States. He also was a governor of one of the states of South Africa. Brilliant man. He was with Nelson Mandela. He was in prison for 20 years. Alhamdulillah, he gave a khutbah in my masjid. And I learned from people, being around people like that, he taught me a very valuable lesson. I'm going to share it with you. So listen to what he said. We have to make a decision as Muslims to what degree we interact with people. And Javaid said it, and Mustafa said it in words, but I'm going to put it, add a little bit more according to what our brother Ibrahim Rasool said. He said, and listen to what he said, we have to make a distinction between shared issues. People have the same issue that we have, not the same aqidah, not the same religion, but a shared issue. And we can form some kind of a partnership. And again, you can interchange words, and right. And then he said, there's some things that are shared objectives. Our objective, this is our objective. We're going to get police reform. That's our objective. And so you can form some kind of coalition. And then he said, then there's shared values. When you have the same value, and you can call it alliances. So Muslims have to make this decision. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, Muslims were asking the question in the United States, are we permitted to vote? Are we permitted to vote? People like Medgar Evers lost his life, and others lost their lives for the right to vote. And Muslims were asking the question, is it permissible Islamically to vote? And I'm here to say, brothers and sisters, I don't think many Muslims are asking that question today. I'm saying absolutely it makes a difference. Abdirahman, give me another 3 minutes and I'll try to end, okay? Let me tell you something that happened. Oftentimes, police been killing black men, especially for many years. Every black person I know have some experience with the police, with white police. I had it too, 18 years old, as a student at New York University. Maybe I'll tell you at another time. But seldom were white officers punished for killing black people, especially black men. But let me show you what happened. Last year, there was a white police officer, a woman, Amber, who actually killed a black man in his own apartment. And she said she thought that she was in her apartment and that he was an intruder. He's sitting down on his own apartment and watching TV on the couch. And now he's dead because of a white police officer killed. Well, she was one of the few white officers that were actually convicted. Let me give you something to think about. Let me tell you something. This happened in Dallas, Texas. Let me tell you something about Dallas. The population of Dallas, 46% Hispanic, 29% white, 24% black. The mayor of Dallas, black. The police chief of Dallas, black. The Dallas County District Attorney, black. The judge presiding over the case, black. Of the 12 jurors and 4 alternatives, 7 of them black, 4 white, and 5 others. So what's happening, there's some political changes happening, and Muslims must be involved with it, because we enjoin the good and we forbid the evil. Finally, my last point I want to say, these are just ideas, and then we can expound upon them. But this is the last point I want to make, brothers and sisters. Our job is bigger than Black Lives Matter. Black lives do matter. Those are my people. I love them. They're my people. And the prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, every prophet came to their people. Except for me, I came to all of mankind. Ya nas inni Rasulullah alaykum jamia, O mankind, I am the messenger of Allah to all of you. So Muhammad is the messenger to the black people, to the red people, the brown people, the white people, all of that. He's the messenger of Allah. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ, Moses said to his people, وَإِذْ قَالَ عِيسَى ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ يَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ. When Jesus said, O children of Israel, I am the messenger of Allah to you. So this Black Lives Matter, of course they do. And we must work with them. They're going to have some people, different ideologies. They have different value systems, but we're working on issues, and we're trying to make some differences. We can make a difference. It's up to us. And we have to get rid of the internal contradictions. So we have contradictions among the Muslims. Yes, Islam is perfect. Muslims are imperfect. But remember this, many American people may never read one verse of the Quran or read one hadith. But every American that I know knows some Muslim, come in contact with some Muslim in school, in the university, on the job, in the store, as neighbors. So let us be the best examples and not just quote from the Quran and hadith, but actually live by it. May Allah bless you, brothers and sisters, and on all of your. I want to thank all the Muslims who are out there demonstrating and protesting. I want to thank you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and bless us. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Imam, for your wonderful thoughts. And I know obviously we are not doing justice in terms of time for the topic that we have at hand. But I do think that a lot of people have benefited from this discussion. And in the last few weeks, since George Floyd was murdered, a lot of people have been trying to educate themselves and really, trying to become a better ally for the Black community. So there's been obviously a lot of questions, and this is the part in where we want to address some of the concerns and also ourselves be, more understanding of the situation and learn from our pioneers and those who are leaders in this field, and let them be the ones that guide us in these moments where people are wondering what to do. So I had a few questions that, inshallah, will address to our panelists and, and kind of get their thoughts, inshallah ta'ala. One of the things is that, obviously, you pointed out that, of course, recently there's a lot of protests right now, and people are demanding justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but there's also these people protesting are also about more than just demanding justice for these two people that were killed, but I think people really want to see a change in America. So I was wondering if you could speak to what policy change you hope that these protests, this movement,
We don't even have to think about them. All you have to do is look at the Congress of the United States of America. All of them. There's a lot of things on the table, and the federal government, also local governments. Many local governments, New York City, Minneapolis, and other places are instituting reforms like no chokeholds and all of things like that. So there's a lot of reform bills being introduced, and it'll happen. Inshallah, it'll get passed to some degree. So again, we don't have to invent anything. The experts are already doing that.
And I wanted to ask, in terms of our Muslim community, What do you think? How can the Muslim community, those who are not Black, those who are not from the African American community, how can they be better supporters in this regard? What can we as a Muslim community be doing better or more, um, and not, also taking the spotlight away from the struggle of the African American community?
You're not taking the spotlight away. You're not. If you look at these demonstrations, every color, different generations, young and old. You saw the 75-year-old man in Buffalo was pushed down. So people recognize, these are the people that saw it and they want to do something about it. And Sheikh Javaid he's already mentioned, we should get involved in whatever way we can, financially, giving our moral support, and even sometimes, with make sure that we protect it, but even going to some of the demonstrations.
So I think one of the things I really want, I think education is important. I think people are looking right now for inspiration. They're looking at historical role models. I was wondering if there are any figures or literature or resources you have been turning to, and what would you recommend to others, especially young people, to turn to during this time in helping inform our thinking about this movement. And I would like to hear from both, both of you.
Let me this will take 10 seconds. Let me tell you something interesting. There's a lot of books. There's a million books, right? But let me tell you two movies. And I know you don't watch movies. I get it, right?
But yeah, right.
Spike Lee, right? The great, right? Producer, director, right? Someone asked him the question, what makes a great movie? He said a great movie has three components. Number one, it's entertaining, educational, and inspirational. And there's two movies I'm going to recommend you to see. The first movie is called 12 Angry Men.
12 Angry Men.
Angry Men. 1956. It came out in 1956. It's a great movie about the criminal justice system. SubhanAllah. And there's this 12 men in a deliberation room, and the whole film is about deliberating on an inner city youth charged with murder. And in the beginning, all of them, they're white men. He guilty, but then it takes another turn. That's number one. 1956. Yeah. Number two came last year. It's called Just Mercy. Just Mercy. It's a must see. You have to watch Just Mercy. And so a lot of these films are very educational. It tells you in a very vivid way what life was like and what life is still like for African American.
Brother Mustafa White, any would you like to add to that question also, in terms of figures that people should read about, or resources, places they can go to? Sheikh mentioned. I didn't know about the 12 Angry Men. That is, I watched Just that's this is a really good one. I want to check out, inshallah.
I was 5 years old when that came out, Sheikh. The autobiography of Malcolm X is standard. And read about the life of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and what he went through Islamically that got him up to where he is today. And there are a number of books that are really pretty. Sherman Jackson's books are pretty good, very good, and Amina McLeod's books are good. And there are a number of books about the history of Muslims in this country, as well as individuals, because you have not just Muslims, you have a number of autobiographies or biographies about Martin Luther King and what he went through, and you understand his struggle from the human point of view, you would benefit from. So you have Muslims, that's one thing, but there are a lot of folks who put their lives on the line here. They weren't just Muslims.
Can I give you some? I'm sorry, got it. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can I give you some good news?
Yeah.
You know, the population of African Americans, something like 12% of the population, and like 30 something percent of the prison population. But the
Mm.
good news is that, like Malcolm, every year between 35,000 and 40,000 inmates take Shahada.
Allahu Akbar.
Tremendous dawah in the prisons. And so just take that in consideration.
Can
By the way,
I?
by
Mm,
the way,
mm.
every year 10,000 innocent people are convicted. Of the 10,000 innocent people convicted every year, innocent people, many of them are African Americans. They just had a man, an African American, was released from prison after 46 years in prison, found out that he was innocent. And there's a lot of cases like that. So there's a lot of work we can do. There's one book called Jeffrey Ryman called The Rich Get Richer and the Poor Get Prison. The rich get richer and the poor get prison. Excellent
Mm.
book on prison reform.
This is very good. If you wanna, I don't know if you've seen the 13th Amendment. Is a documentary about mass incarceration in America. I thought that was really profound and talked about the inequalities in the prison the prison industrial complex that is that is huge and making so much money profiteering off of the blacks that are being massively incarcerated across this country. But
Ibrahim X. Kendi's book, Stamped. Very good
Scam.
book. Stamped, yes. Very good book. About how policies affect the racism in this country. It's coming from the highest levels. And he details the empire. The book is like 600 pages, but it's a very good book. Stamped. Ibrahim X. Kendi.
I wrote it, yeah. And I hope people are also writing it on the other side, inshallah, and taking. I do have some other, maybe two more questions, inshallah, and hopefully we can get some perspective from all of you on this issue. When you so number one is, what do you think uh, that as Muslim community we need to do better to be truly helpful allies? That's really a question that's come up from a couple of audience members, and we wanted to know what can they do more. Whether it's obviously there are people that are who are participating and in these peaceful protesting, and there's people that who are alternatively are not. But what message do you have for them in ways that they can help and change the system of racism within our community and outside?
I used to, I gave a few talks around the country years back. Now, I'd always end the talks with, go down to the community and ask them. Don't assume that you think you have what they need. Go and ask them. Start the dialogue. Start the dialogue. Ask.
That's it. Just talk.
Talk.
Just talk. I agree.
Do you feel
Sheikh
that
Javaid, I'm gonna recommend a book for Sheikh Javaid, but no one else. Sheikh Javaid, I want you to consider this book, right? As it's written by the greatest historian of our modern time. His name is Toynbee. And Arnold Toynbee, yeah. It's called The History of the World. You think, Javaid, you might want to read that book? You think so?
Inshallah.
Let me tell you something that may discourage you. Okay? I don't want to discourage you, but what I'm going to say now may discourage you. It has 12 volumes.
12 volumes? Wow. It's a very long.
7,000 pages. 300 million words.
Wow.
You still want to read? You still want to read it?
You're putting a lot on. It's going to be a journey and lifetime reading.
Let me tell you why I said it, and this will be my last words. I'm going to give the other brothers an opportunity to talk. Let me tell you why I said it, and Javaid, you may have heard me say it before, and I think it's worth repeating. This is a non-Muslim. He's recognized as the authority on history. He said this. These are my concluding remarks. The solution to all international conflicts lies only in embracing Islam en masse, because Islam is the only religion that can transcend nationalism. I see with great dismay that nationalism is gaining grounds even among the bearers of the Quran. I will hope for the day when all humanity will break this idol and unite as the children of God. Non-Muslim said this. And he knows all we got to do is be what we're supposed to be. Follow the book and be genuine with people. Talk to people. I talk to people all the time, Muslims and non-Muslims all the time. And as Mustafa said, find out, how can we help? How can we help?
MashaAllah.
And
That's really profound. And hopefully we'll get to that book. It's a long journey to get to the end of it, but hopefully it's something worth having in your resources, right?
I'm going to need some long time here.
But it's a good resource. I even wrote it down. I really appreciate that. I think Imam, and I think to some of our speakers, this question comes and they say that Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Imam Siraj. My question is to you. You said that as a Muslim, our responsibility is more than supporting the Black Lives movement. Very true. But as Muslims, what should be our input in this movement? Can you please give some open advice how to participate and be part of this movement? And also, this is not an ideal. Oh, sorry. Just let me finish the question, and then I'll. Also, this is not an ideal time to introduce our Islamic view on racism in order to spread da'wah as Muslims and grab the attention of our non-Muslim fellow Americans.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I think it's a mistake, honestly. Listen, I am who I am. The Black Lives Movement, you may not know this, Black Lives Matter, they have an agenda. They have an absolute agenda, right? And this is why I talked about when we can work together on issues, right? But what I'm saying to you, there's a brother in my community who told me, Imam, I take 29 different medications a day. I take 29 different medications a day. You know why? Because he got 29 issues. And I'm telling you, the medication that he takes doesn't solve the problem. When a man came to the Prophet complaining that his brother had a stomach ache, the Prophet said, Isqi asalin, give him honey. Why? Because honey is a shifa, it's a cure. One day there will be a cure for COVID-19. There's no question about it. Why? Because the Prophet said, there's no sickness without disease. Allah will send there's no sickness without a cure. Allah will send the cure. But these things that we're dealing with symptoms. Racism is a part of it, is real. I don't want to undercut that. It's real. We should do it. But I'm saying there's a lot of other problems. There's a million problems that we have to deal with. And I'm saying that when you deal with the root of the problem, rather than going to the symptoms, then you're dealing with the root. And I'm saying, don't put down Islam. You want to talk that Islam stuff? No, Islam stuff is the stuff that deals with the. Listen. We have a drug problem in our country. 70,000 people lost their lives in our country from overdose of drugs. 70,000. 40,000 Americans commit suicide in our country. You got a lot of issues, right? So you want to go after each issue, you go after each issue. 1,400 years ago, they had a drug problem among the people that the Prophet, peace and blessing, came to teach. And Allah never mentioned, the first 13 years, Allah never even mentioned alcohol. He didn't mention khamra. 4 years after that, Allah mentioned it, and he didn't mention it. Allah didn't bring it up. He said, yes, alunaka ana khamr wa maisir. They're asking you, O Muhammad, about it. Cool, say this. My point is this, right? And when Allah finally revealed, fajtanibuhu la'alkum tuflihun, leave it alone to be successful, the people, they poured out the alcohol. And Aisha radiallahu anha said, Had Allah first revealed, thou shalt not drink alcohol, the people would have said, we'll never give it up. We'll never give it up. Why? Because Allah is dealing with the issue. The issue is obedience to Allah, and that solves all of those problems. So I'm not saying push Islam to the side. We're not gonna. No, we're gonna help them. But you really want to help them? Show them the right way. You really want to help them? Show them the right way, and that'll solve all their problems. And also, we will help them. I'm very strong on that.
Yeah, because when you look at it, during the civil rights movement, a lot of people turned to Islam as an answer to some of the, racism that they were finding in America. But now there's this call that, is like, well, we need to disassociate, the Islam.
Mustafa mentioned it. Mustafa, you listen to his speech, he mentioned, I was a member of the Nation of Islam. It really, the Nation of Islam, may Allah bless them. Many of them, alhamdulillah, came all the way and they graduated to Islam with Imam Muhammad, alhamdulillah. But one thing, Mustafa is right. We that's all we dealt with. We dealt with the whole oppression against black people. But that's not the entirety of Islam. That's not the entirety of what Allah wants us to do. Yeah, it's there. It's injustice. We fight against injustice. We now know that Islam is the way to fight against the injustice. We know that now, right? So I'm saying, don't what I find out, we minor in the major and we major in the minor.
SubhanAllah, that's very powerful.
Don't you ever underestimate, brother, the power of Islam. Wallahi. The Prophet showed us the way. 23 years. Look at the transformation of that society. And we're going to try to follow that sunnah. And we're going to solve all the problems, inshallah.
Inshallah. Before we go to closing statements for the program, would anyone like to add to that, what the Imam said?
I just wanted to agree wholly 100%. Sometimes we go all around the barn just to go back through the same door. And all those things that we learned early on, those principles are still the same. Nothing has changed in the Sunnah of Allah. Nothing has changed in the Sunnah of our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Early days that when we came into Islam with all that enthusiasm and all that zeal, and the principles that we learned early on, they are still there. Like Imam said, Islam is the answer. Nothing new, nothing fancy. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You got to come straight with it. Nothing has changed. And how the dawah is to be given. The problem with what's going on is that they're rejecting the tawheed. And when you do that, you're going to have a miserable life. We have to clarify this message in the same way that it was given to us 40, 50 years ago.
Ameen.
MashaAllah. Power to the truth, mashallah. I like that. So inshallah, and I don't have any more questions from my end. So inshallah, we said that we're gonna have closing remarks from all of our panelists. So inshallah, we'll start with I don't know who, but Brother Javaid, maybe inshallah, and then we'll go to Siraj, inshallah.
No, Jazakumullah khair. I truly want to say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve you and protect you, Imam, Brother Mustafa, Sheikh Abdirahman, for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this conversation. Truly, this was a learning moment for me. So at so many levels. I love the example Imam Siraj gave about how many bubbles were in the soap and the constant. Wow, that was amazing. I mean, I actually never knew that. I learned something new. I mean, all the references and books and videos, but this is what shows us the power of education when we know, because when we love the Prophet ﷺ, we love him because we know more about him. When we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Asma al-Husna, we know more about him and we really get into the subject. And this is what we need to do here, I think, as Muslims, and especially the immigrant community. Once we understand and learn and know the principles, this is where I was trying to reference the first point in my conversation there. We need to understand the principle of why are we doing what we are doing. And once you are really in sync with that principle, then everything falls in place. as Imam said, as Brother Mustafa is saying, when you beat around the bush, you can't get to the root of the problem. You will continue to beat around the bush. So I think this is a moment of reflection for all of us, and inshallah, those who are listening and watching, we can inshallah hopefully hope and pray that this would really stimulate their thinking process, and they would really become very connected to this basic idea of what is going to save people at the end of the day. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, Brother Javaid, for the beautiful words. Brother Mustafa White, closing
Alhamdulillah, thank you for having me. It's always an opportunity to share information and hear and learn, and I take away more than hopefully what I brought in. I appreciate that. Seeing Brother Javaid, Brother Siraj, and meeting you, Sheikh Abdirahman, for the first time, and to try and bring these kinds of issues and come up with some real practical solutions inside Quran and Sunnah that we can take forward. So thank you for the opportunity. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair.
And I want to thank everyone. Always educational for me, Sheikh Javaid, Brother Mustafa, Abdirahman. I'm going to give you another quotation from Martin Luther King Jr. I'm a child of the civil rights movement, right? When I say I marched, literally, what these guys are doing now, we did that all my life, alhamdulillah. But Martin Luther King Jr.
Imam, you cut off for a second, but I think I want the audience to hear that very clearly, you know?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I'm just saying that I'm a child of the civil rights movement, and I marched, I demonstrated, and I'll continue to do that, inshallah. But I want to give you a picture that Martin Luther King painted. He said, every one of you are either a thermometer or thermostat. Every one of you are either a thermometer or thermostat. A thermometer can measure how hot or how cold it is, but that's all it does. But a thermostat is better, because if it's too hot, you can make it cool. You can turn it down. If it's too cold, you can make it hot. So if you're a thermometer, all you do is complain. Oh, it's cold, it's cold, it's too hot. But you don't do nothing about it. So I don't want to be a thermometer. I want to be a thermostat. And we can be a thermostat as Muslims. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, and his companions, they made a difference. They changed. They didn't just talk about it. They didn't just register their complaint. They made a difference. And we have to do the same thing, consult with one another, and help one another toward righteousness and the fear of Allah.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair, Imam Siraj, Brother Mustafa White, and our dearest Brother Javaid Siddiqi, for this enlightening conversation. Obviously, this is not our last time. We plan on, inshallah, continue as a community and as a Muslim community in America to have these discussions and bring light to this and not be afraid to talk about it and educate our Muslims about this. So we are very, very thankful to you. Thank you to Helping Hand and ICNA New York for organizing this program, and to our audience for participating, the lovely questions and dialogue and participation. Jazakallah khair to all of you. Let's all do our part to be part of this anti-racism in our community. We need to root out racism from our communities, from our schools and our jobs and every sector of our life, inshallah ta'ala, to see that every human being is equally treated fairly, inshallah. With that, we'll, inshallah ta'ala, end the program. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.